Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today, we are speaking with an athlete who was born in India and moved to the United States at 10 years old. She won her pro card at her first national show, the NPC Universe, in 2023. She's a medical student, a second lieutenant in the Air Force, prep and lifestyle coach, as well as an NPC posing coach, and a personal trainer at Dean Caputo's Powerhouse Gym in Ohio, and a cat mom. I just saw her cat come on the screen. So if you're watching on YouTube /_fit, you might catch a glimpse. She has just completed her, what'd you say?
You'll probably start running around.
Yeah, she's like, I'm the
Like
star.
the attention.
I notice that with all the cat moms when their cat goes on, it's like, uh-oh, we got a new pro in town. So she has just competed her first pro season. She's currently in an improvement season to bring her best for her next season. And her background in competitive dance has actually contributed to her love of bodybuilding and being on stage, along with the many ways competing has saved her life and brought her a greater community. Welcome to the show, VERUSHQA Andrade. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. It's honestly, I'm just so flattered to be here. It's an honor. I'm very excited to share my story.
I'm so happy you're here too, and I'm grateful. I was just saying to you before we started recording how awesome it is that there's so many more full circle moments that I'm having with competitors now, where they're like, I listened to you since I started, and now I'm on the show, and it's like, oh yeah, I've been doing this long enough where people have been in it for a while.
Yeah, it's honestly amazing because I started following you and following your podcast since the very beginning. The very first podcast that I listened to when I first started in the sport. And it was so inspiring. Just listening to all these pros that you had brought on each episode and hearing their story and seeing them as more than just a pro. They're real humans and they go through a lot of things I was going through. So, and now it's just, like you said, a full circle. It's an honor to be here, and I hope to be that sort of inspiring thing for someone else, perhaps. So,
Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. And I'm grateful you said that because I think that really sets the intention and it sets the stage, right? Like that is the goal, is to have people feel connected on a level that goes beyond bodybuilding and know that we are real people. And a pro was once an amateur and a pro was once just starting out. So it's great to hear that that story to becoming a champion. And you know, from listening, I always like to ask if there's anything you do or think about, or maybe a ritual right before your heel hits the stage.
yeah, so I don't have a set ritual, I would say, but one thing I always do is I pray. I do a little prayer before I go on stage. It helps calm my nerves. Um, on show day, I'm very excited, but the minutes it gets closer to stage time, the nerves start kicking in. So just taking that deep breath, saying a little prayer, and then just saying to myself, okay, bitch, it's showtime, you know? So um that's kind of where I'm at. Like, because otherwise I may get in my head and I need to just remind myself, okay, you got this. You've worked so hard to get where you're at. And then just reminding myself, okay, I'm a badass. So all that work, time to show it, you know? Yeah, so that's basically it. And yeah.
I love that. Getting in
Yeah.
that headspace of like, let's showcase everything we've worked towards. I think too, you go through that reflection in prayer or that grounding through prayer, and you're reminded of everything that you've been through. So let's get straight into the nitty-gritty of your road to pro because you faced a lot of obstacles leading into your win at Universe, including a car accident that left you unable to walk for almost 2 weeks at 6 weeks out from Universe, while also going through relationship struggles and being in school. So, can you just talk to us more about how you navigated these challenges and what they actually looked like? And then we'll kind of go into what that meant to you when you went pro.
Yeah, so a few weeks, just that whole prep was just a hard time, I would say. I had just gotten into this relationship, was very, very like, I would say it was a very controlling relationship. And I hadn't been in a relationship for a while before then. I had taken a long time to myself, and then getting into this relationship, I just felt stuck for a long time. And I think I believe it just caused me to question a lot of my self-worth things. So with school, I was going through school during that time as well, which is another ball game while you're in prep, low in food, and trying
Mhm.
to study at the same time. I had to take these big exams, and there was a lot of pressure coming on many sides, having this relationship that was like coming at me in an emotional aspect and being drained physically through prep and
Mhm.
then trying to be there mentally for school all just kind of took a toll on me. But I was pushing through. Honestly, prep is my lifesaver during that time.
Yeah.
Um, it's the one constant in my life, bodybuilding in general. So that's what I hold on to when everything's going crazy. And that's what I kept reminding myself that whole prep leading up to Universe. At least I have bodybuilding. That was keeping me afloat, basically. Um, so a few weeks um into Universe, I had gotten into a bad car accident on my way to my gym, and it just shook me up. So I had completed my first show of that season during that time. And then I was a few weeks into my very first national show. Um, and I remember that moment in the car. I, you know how when people have like near death life experiences,
Mhm.
things slow down, and things slowed down for me in that moment. Um, and just truly reminding myself of what really matters. Um, and I was going through so many different things, and the small stresses that I was going through went away during that moment. What I thought about was my loved ones, bodybuilding too. That went through my head. Um, and how I want to make an impact in this world. Like that's the main things that had gone through my head during that time. And when I was going into the ambulance on the way to the hospital from that accident, it was kind of amusing, but like the first thing I think about was I asked them, like the people, like, oh, will I be able to walk? Will I be able to train? Like, because that's
Yeah,
what was going in my head
of
because I was a
course.
few weeks out from nationals. And they're like, let's just see if you can walk first before anything. Um, but it's just something where when something happens like that, you really appreciate the small things, like being able to walk. Not being able to train for 2 weeks legs was a little scary for me because I was still planning to do the show.
Mhm.
Because I'm also very like set in my mind, and when I set my mind to something, I'll do it. And at that time, so when I was in the hospital, I had no family around. Um,
Mhm.
and at that time, the person I was in a relationship with, wasn't there for me. And that was one of the main things that made me realize it was a wake-up call. Like, okay, this is not the type of person I need to be with. I need to be with someone who I can rely on, you know? And the one person who was there for me during that time, since my family was far away, so they were with me just through the phone, but the person who was really there for me was um a trainer at my gym, Dean Caputo's gym, who actually ended up now is my partner in coaching. But we really bonded during that moment because she dropped everything. I told her it's okay, but she literally dropped everything to be there for me during that time. And she was there with me in the hospital and helped me through. Um, and she was saying, we'll walk around this injury. When the minute I start being able to use my legs again, we'll do things that maybe won't require bending my knee. So we did a lot of just hamstring things rather than quad focus things like that. And like the my whole community, my whole gym community was there for me during that time. They became my family away from home. And that's what really pushed me through, I would say. Besides having that like mindset of this is what I'm going to do, having that support really helped take me there. And so through it all, when I had done a show in between Universe, but that was more just like a practice run. I actually was still limping during that time.
Mhm.
But I had also set my mind to that show. It's called North Coast Championships, which was run by my gym. Um, and I did it as something fun because I love just competing. And I didn't even know if I could be able to walk. I remember when I was getting tanned, my wound was still open
Oh.
and I didn't even know if it was going to get closed up. There was a big gnashing wound on my knee. And um thankfully, the morning of the show, it like magically closed up. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm meant to do this. And I went on that stage, and my goal really was to just walk and make it look like I have no injury.
Mhm.
And after that, it just motivated me to continue on into Universe. Training was still hard during that time, but the minute I started being able to use my legs more, um, I went all in and um, wanted to bring my best to Universe. And during even that time, it was very encouraging to me to keep going because I would get messages from a lot of girls or even girls competitors at my gym saying how seeing me push through my injury really helped them see that they can go through any obstacle. And so that also like encouraged me, even though they said it was encouraging them, it encouraged me to keep going as well. And then I went into Universe with a mindset of, I'm bringing my best, whatever happens, happens.
Mhm.
And I'm just happy to be there and experience it. I had zero expectations because this was my first show. And I was just amazed at the girls backstage. Personally felt small. I didn't know, like, I was like, maybe I am in my head. I went through a lot of imposter syndrome um, during that time because, and even so now, I think a lot of people deal with the imposter syndrome. Even as a pro, you just don't feel like you fully belong, sometimes, especially as a new pro.
Mhm.
Um, but I've dealt with that in school as well. They call it white coat syndrome. I don't
Mhm.
know if you're familiar with that,
Yeah.
but um, the whole time into that, I was like, I don't know if I belong here. But the minute I was in Universe and on that stage, and then they kept me in center and held me there, I was literally shaking in myself. I don't know if the judges could tell, but I was just shaking, couldn't believe it. And it was such an amazing feeling victorious, basically,
Mm.
and not just for that placement or win. It was victory over everything I'd gone through, the bad relationship, the doubts, the self-doubts I had in school, the self-doubts I had in everything, just competing. It all went out, and I was like, this is why I continued and where I am where I am today, despite everything I went through. And it actually defined me. It made me stronger. And there was a lot more than just that pro win on that stage. Um, yeah, so I every time I look back at that experience, I'm reminded of how strong I am. And even now, when I go through things, I go back to that. Because there was just so much that went in that time. Um, yeah, so you can honestly get through anything just as long as you keep going.
That's such a great story of overcoming and facing difficulties that you don't even know what the other side looks like. You're really just put in a position where you have to take it one day at a time, and you don't have family near you. And so to have a friend come through who's there for you is amazing. And to have the encouragement of the gym and your family, your gym family there is so wonderful. And it gives you maybe life or hope where you don't always have it. And sometimes I tell people, hey, if you don't have belief in yourself right now, you can borrow it from me because I believe in you. You know, borrow your belief from other people if you need to, just to get through to the next day. And it sounds like you were doing a lot of that. Now, I want to backtrack to what you had said was a near-death experience, essentially. Everything slowed down. What exactly happened with the car accident that put you in a position where you were not able to walk?
Yeah, so that car accident, my car was basically totaled.
Hmm.
And I had gotten a very deep wound in my right knee. I still have a big scar to show it. Um, and no broken bones, nothing like that, but it was so deep to a point where I wasn't able to bend my knee at all. I had to keep it completely straight.
Yeah.
And so walking was a struggle because you don't realize, but like you bend your knee all the time
Always, yeah.
when you're walking. And so training was out of the question, cardio was out of the question. So that wound, though, it seemed to be healing well. And
Mhm.
then a week after, I started seeing just signs of cellulitis. And that's something, it's basically like infection in the skin
Oh
that
no.
can go into the blood eventually. And basically, it didn't look like an infection. So for a while, I thought it was just my foot was like my leg was inflamed. It
Right.
looked 3 times the size of my other leg. But I thought it was just inflammation. And then I started feeling my skin. It was hot to the touch, and just the things I've learned in school.
Hmm.
And I may have gone a bit later than I should have because I just waited a bit longer, but it had spread down to my ankle,
Wow.
its infection, and up to my hip. And
Mm.
so at that time, I was driving a rental car, and I was the stubborn me. I should have called for help, but I decided to drive. And, of course, the person I was in a relationship kind of just kind of disappeared on me for a bit. So I could have called a good friend, and a lot of my friends were quite upset when I told them this.
Oh, of course.
I decided to drive on my own with my one foot to the ER, and then admitted myself in the ER. No one knew about it. And um I was there all day, and I remember I was studying I had boards during that time too, which was so
Mhm.
difficult. Um, and I spent the all day in that hospital, and then the doctor had finally come in and showed me how far it had spread and thought he would want to admit me. And I was just, I did not want to be admitted. A main reason because I was a few weeks out from Universe, and
Yeah,
I was still like going at it as much as I could. I was mostly
right.
lifting, I was just lifting upper body. And I knew if I was admitted in the hospital, I don't know when they would let
Mhm.
me out. And he finally said, okay, since you're young, I'm hopeful that you'll fight this with oral antibiotics. And so then we'll see how it goes. If anything happens, come back. And thankfully it got cleared with oral
Good.
antibiotics. I didn't have to go back. Because that would may have meant I wouldn't have been able to compete. So that was the extent of my wound, basically.
But then
Um,
even taking oral antibiotics, like as a competitor, everything you do, your body's so sensitive to it. Yeah, so you're risking like, okay, how's my gut gonna respond to this? Am I gonna be
exactly.
inflamed?
Exactly. And that's what I was very nervous about too, is how I'm going to respond to that, and also how I'm going to let out all that water my body was holding on to, not just with the medications, but just with being inflamed. Um,
Healing.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so we just had a few weeks into Universe, so I was just hoping that everything just went smoothly. And thankfully, the minute I started um, getting healed from that infection was mostly what was holding me, like it was delaying my healing process. So even my wound was having a hard time to heal. So once that cleared, my wound started healing. I started feeling better, and I worked around my training until about, I would say, like 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks out, I could like train a bit better, lower body. And we brought the best package we could. And it was my best during that season. So it was awesome to be able to experience that.
That is incredible on so many levels. I mean, for one, your resilience, there are a lot less intense situations that happen in people's lives that will create the decision to pull out of a show. So to go through all of that and still have that type of drive and that commitment, something must have been in you telling you you got to go to Universe, or something was happening that you're like, I'm not giving up on this. What was that?
I think a big part of it is just because everything else was falling apart in my life during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And even with school, I think that accident was a pivotal moment in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially during that accident, once I started going through the healing and everything, it was so hard to even study for school. It was so hard to do anything. And like, but prep is something that I was so stubborn. I didn't want to let go of it. Um, and I was just, the thing that was driving me to continue was just because everything was falling apart. I wanted that one thing that I love so much that I'm
Mm-hmm.
holding on to. And I was like, if I go through this, I can go through anything, So that was my mindset. And um I'd gone back and forth on nationals for a bit because I was new. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I wasn't sure if I was ready, but a lot of people were telling me, my friend Cece, who had been with me in the hospital, she said, no, you have to do nationals. You have the physique for it. And a lot of people online, Grace, who is also a master's competitor who was at the show Universe, we were talking for a long time leading into Universe, and she had encouraged me to continue because she's like, you are almost there, don't stop. And a lot of people, just the community, like helping me through that. But it was just also me internally. I just wanted that win, I think, for myself as well. And
Mm.
it's not the win on the pro win. It was the win of being
Being
able
there.
to get through it and be there. Yeah.
For sure. The almost at that point, the pro card becomes a cherry on top, given everything else you've
Yes,
already endured.
exactly. Exactly.
Which is really, I think, I don't know, I hesitate to use the word should, but I would prefer to see that for most people, like that the journey, that process was more rewarding and something that was so life-giving, strength-giving, validating beyond a pro card. And obviously, yes, that's what you were working towards, but more than that, bodybuilding was giving you some consistency and some peace of mind and something that was yours in a time of your life where you didn't have a person who was supposed to be like a rock actually be a rock. You also had to really rely heavily on yourself, rebuild with uncertainty, but also have this incredible community surround you. So obviously that's made a very positive impact on you. And when you look at your pro card win, you see, like you said, more than just that pro card. You see so much strength that you had to create or was fostered in that. Now, I want to talk about the other side of this. So, the relationship side. I mean, obviously, you've shared some things where it's like, this person, who is it? I'm ready. Let's go. Obviously, don't disclose that. But you know what I mean? That's what I'm feeling right now. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, girl, after this, you just tell me what we need to do. But um
Yeah, we'll get together and, have a little
you'll have a
talking with
confessions
them.
of
Yeah.
Baby Bro army.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think we'll have any trouble getting people in this fight with us. But okay, let's go to that situation. So obviously, when you're in a relationship like that, sometimes it takes going through something really intense to reveal, like, oh, yeah, this person is really not who maybe I've built them up in my head to be or who they have claimed to be, or among other things. So, what was happening and how did you actually get out of it? Because sometimes it's a difficult thing to do, is the most difficult thing is actually to get out.
Yeah, so during that time, I think I get these, what they call like rose-colored glasses
Mhm.
when
A
you're in a
boredom.
relationship. Yeah, so I I never saw the red flags, and I tend to have this pattern a lot when I really like someone. And I have really close friends, a lot of close guy friends who always warn me, and they see it way before I do. And I'm just, trying to just mostly, and I think we all do this, see the potential in a relationship.
Mhm.
So, we had a lot in common. We were both competing, we were both in prep, and it's just something, if it's with the right person, it could be really great.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of things where very controlling, and he didn't see my worth for what it was, and I would be giving a lot, to the relationship, and he was more of that taker sort of mindset. I would do things out of my way to basically make him happy. We're both in prep during this time, and um the thing that like I was just so like flabbergasted, I guess, with what he had said is we're both in prep and I'd just gone through this accident, and um he was just saying how there's a lot, I'm going through right now, and could you come to me basically to take care of him when I can barely walk. And um and that's what I did. I shouldn't have, but I one-legged drove to him to serve his needs because that's all he thought about was just his needs and like what he's going through, even though we're both going through prep. Um and then I was going through an accident, which was even, like a lot on me.
Mhm.
Um, and so that kind of lit up on me, just that little like warning sign. And so a few weeks after um or into universe, I had basically like told him like, I think you're in a spot where it doesn't seem like you're ready to be in a relationship because you're very focused on you and your goals. We took it very amicably, I would say. It could have gone worse. But after speaking to my friends and just finally just sitting down to talk to him, it went surprisingly amicable and well because we're both also in this industry, I think. So we wanted to not cause or create any drama. So, yeah, so he understood and we left it at there.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think we can all relate to seeing people with the rose-colored glasses and kind of engaging in like the build a man mentality. Like, okay, well, I see the potential. Therefore, if I do this
Mhm.
consistently for them, then this will happen. And it's like magical thinking that we engage in an effort to hopefully create what we maybe were once promised or convinced of in them. And then
Exactly.
you can't deny the truth any longer when you see it enough.
Yeah, and that's what my dad had always told me this. My stepdad, I can't quote it as correctly as he does it, but it's something about men date as they see what it is like versus women date for potential.
Hmm.
And I personally do that a lot. I see what it could be versus what it is. Um, and that's where we can get caught up, you know. And it takes sometimes people around you who love you to like shake you, you know, and remind you. Um, yeah.
Yeah, a question I wish I would have asked myself when I was in a unhealthy relationship was if this never changed, if this person was this way forever, would you stay? Would you be happy? And obviously, we don't go into relationships just to receive, right? It's a mutual connection, it's a partnership. However, you shouldn't be drained and miserable either. So when I started thinking like that, I was able to come to terms with, oh, this behavior is not something I want to tolerate forever. And
Mhm.
it probably isn't changing. And then I started looking at, I don't want to say too much, but I started to think, when people grow up and they become a certain age, generally there's some things where like, hey, that's gonna take a lot of inner work to change that. I
Yeah.
can't do that for you. So
Yeah.
you come to terms with like that just might be who they are. And it's just
Oh,
not
yeah.
gonna work for me.
Yeah, I completely get that. Sometimes it's the way someone I think is raised or grown up. Um, and it's gonna take a lot, and it may never happen that they change because they don't want to, they don't see the need to change, you
Yes,
know? It needs to be that internal choice
exactly.
for them to change. Um, so yeah, that's a good advice to for me to keep in mind next time too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Would you stay if it never changed?
exactly. Yeah.
And there's obviously learning phases we go through with dating where we're like getting to know someone and they kind of rub us the wrong way. And we're like,
Mhm.
well, I'm not staying if that. But it's like, okay, we're not looking for perfect,
Yes,
but at least we're not
absolutely.
making excuses anymore for patterns.
Exactly. Yeah, like, and there's certain, we all have our little quirks. It's
Mhm.
like, are you able to live with that quirk
Yeah.
with the person? Um, so yeah. But then there's a difference between that and then having like certain like red flag markers that you
Yes.
don't want in a person. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think there are things that I could have identified as red flags early on that I
Mm.
didn't, and I chose to ignore because I focused more on why would they do that instead of how does what they're doing make me feel.
Mhm. That's so true. And you're sometimes you try to reason out on why they may be doing something, you know, trying to
Yeah.
defend them basically. When it's just they didn't have exactly a reason, it's just what they did. Um, and that's just who they are. So, um, and that's where I'm still learning, I think. I'm still learning to identify those red flags. I'm noticing them now. And honestly, with each relationship, because I've gone into a couple bad ones and it's a pattern. It has been a pattern for me to be in a similar type. So I'm trying to step out of that now. But each relationship we go through, I think it's learning. It's a learning experience, and I've learned a lot about what I want in a person and what I don't. So I never exactly regret any relationship I've been in, because I've learned a lot, even with that relationship that I was in leading up to Universe. I learned a lot about myself and how naive I could be as well, and now what the values I want to look for in a person. Um, yeah. So
Good.
I'm in some way grateful to him in some ways, I guess, because I've learned about myself and he pushed me to go through Universe because I just had that like mindset after that. Um, so indirectly, everything we go through can be a blessing in some ways, you know?
Absolutely. When people ask like about regrets, specifically about uh the relationship, I always think like that's such a hard question to answer because it's like obviously maybe you regret not addressing the red flags as soon as you saw them or ignoring them. Maybe, but at the end of the day you don't because it potentially formed a more conscious version of you who's aware of these things or who stands up for herself or who identifies her needs more clearly or who doesn't settle for negative treatment or maltreatment and who
Mhm.
does pursue her goals and her dreams at a higher level. So I think there's like I guess how I view it is God works in it no matter what. So even if we stay and it's not healthy and God doesn't want us in it, he's still working through it.
That's so true. And there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We just, in the midst of it, we don't see it, and we don't know what it's going to look like at the end, but definitely God has his hands on it at all times. So, um, yeah, sometimes it's just hard when you're in it, I think. Um, yeah.
I appreciate you also being so vulnerable about like how you've identified it as a pattern in your life because I'm sure there's other women who are listening right now like, "Oh my gosh, that's me," or "I've been doing that too." And to come to terms with that is sometimes like is confronting, right? We're holding up a mirror and we're like, "Oh yeah, I should probably do something different if I want something
Exactly.
different."
And I think because I've done a lot of self-reflection on this too. I started just going to a therapy or a counselor about this and just with everything. And I had never gone through therapy at all or like
Mhm.
counseling or anything until shortly after nationals, like after Universe, I started because I was dealing with a lot of that things, self-worth with school and with my relationships and a lot of things. So walking through that with a counselor and doing a lot of self-reflection, I think a lot of times we fall into those relationship patterns is because we don't realize our own self-worth in a lot of ways, so we settle for that sort of treatment. And sometimes it's just like really like realizing that you're worth a lot more than what you're getting and to break away from that. That's the hardest part is break away. Sometimes you're comfortable in that situation And for me, I was very comfortable in that situation for a long time. And it took a lot of courage to break away from it and realizing that I shouldn't tolerate this for myself.
It's more addictive to be in a situation where someone is inconsistent because
Mhm.
you like, oh, now I've got it, and then it's gone, and so you're is it coming? Isn't it? And then it's here, and so that's an addictive pattern versus someone who's consistent and healthy and reliable, all the things that we should really be looking for. It's not as addictive after you've been through some of those things, which can make it difficult.
That's so true. Don't they call it like the highs and lows of
Mm.
something where you get like, like love bombing. You
Oh
get
yeah,
bombed and then when they pull away, you're craving for that
yeah,
sort of feeling
exactly.
again. Things like that. So like the addictive thing that you brought up reminded me of that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's very true. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about self-worth too, because I think there's certain areas of life where you can feel very worthy, very confident, very sure of yourself. And then there's other areas where you're like, oh, I actually have a difficult time expressing what I need or feeling that my needs are worth expressing or even meant to be met at all.
Yes, that's so true. Um, and just like I think with that, it's also like people with perfectionist mindset, they
Mm.
may um question that a lot, when things don't go a certain way. And that's one thing I've realized with everything, just with life, things don't go exactly as planned,
Oh,
even with
I
the
hate that.
universe. And even just this last season I went through, there were a lot of ups and downs in the road, and life happens in between and things
Mhm.
like that. And when things don't go as expected, or maybe even like with a show, a placing or something, you can really, really reconsider your self-worth in that way. You put a lot on your self-worth through those things. Um, but you have to realize the bigger picture and the real wins in life, going through all that and still going through and making it through. And with placement, it's like looking at improvement from show to show versus a number, because the placement is just based on who shows up. So I think self-worth can be seen a lot of different ways. Self-worth in bodybuilding, self-worth in relationships, career-wise. Yeah. So it's a lot of self-reflection. I think it's good to do for ourselves. Um, and I'm only recently starting to do that more. Because I used to not really focus a lot on mental health and um, ideas of self-worth and things like that. And when it all hit me at once, I think I was bearing things for so long, and then it all hit me that time during the accident and everything. Maybe it was that near death. I don't know, but like I really started getting more self-aware of things, and then broke away from that relationship and like started really reevaluating my life and things.
I think you bring up such a great point. There's oftentimes an attachment of outcome to worth instead of process.
Mhm.
And it's important that we are more focused on what's coming from the process. And this is true in everything. Like you said, even in school, like if we just want to get a good grade, I mean, you can study, like crash study, try to cram it all and never grasp the concept and get good grades, but that doesn't actually determine your potential ability or the way that you'll feel about it. And I grew up in a house where my mom would always say, she's like, okay, like you can submit that assignment and you probably get a good grade, but will you be happy with the work you did? And I would always be like, and that it it created a level of commitment to the work more than to the outcome. She's like, because you can submit it, but if you're not happy with what you did or how you did it, are you really going to be glad when you get the grade back? You want to know you gave it your all. You want to know you're proud of the work, regardless. Because then if you're proud of it and you get a D, you knew you were proud of it. But, and I thought, that can be applied in so many circumstances. And you said you've gotten like the white coat syndrome, you've had the imposter syndrome in these areas. So, in what ways has actually like focusing on your mental health supported you in maybe more of that self-belief or self-worth?
Yeah, so with the imposter syndrome thing, I've dealt with that a lot. With just schooling. It's a big thing in medical school, and I'm sure in a lot of fields, um, because we're put like in medical school, like all the things we go through to get there, and then we're finally there, and now we're training to be a doctor. It's huge, and sometimes I think even doctors now go through imposter syndrome at times. Even though they're already up there, they know their specialty really well. I think it still goes in their head. Are they really truly worth their title? But for me, imposter syndrome for a long time, I think because it was hard because I don't define myself as either a medical student, and a lot of people in my community, that's their identity. And I felt out of place in
Yeah.
there because I have like my niche in different things. Um, and I sometimes felt like I didn't fit in that mold, because I feel like I can't be molded in one thing. So for a while I wasn't sure if I'm really meant to be there, things like that. And then with school, I actually did quite well in school. I love learning, and I think that's why I love bodybuilding as well, because it's a constant learning thing. And no
Totally.
matter how many times you're in it or how long, you're a student of the sport. And same with medicine. Medicine's constantly evolving and you're constantly learning. So I loved medicine, and I love bodybuilding. And um it was cool to be able to do them both side by side, and still at this point doing them both. But for a while, I think I started to get burnout. So, um, and that's also quite common. Um, and and it wasn't because I was in prep, while in school. I don't think that ever really led to my burnout. Prep, I think I mentioned before, it like really gave me the strength to keep going in many ways. And it actually kept me regimented for school.
Yeah.
So it was great. But just I think with the amount of studying I had to do, I eventually started to get burnout and feel that burnout, but I was ignoring it. I was keeping all that down. I was just pushing through. And then that near that time of the accident when I was studying for my exams and things like that, I really started self-reflecting on how I'm really feeling. And I was like, okay, you know what? Just stop, and I need to reevaluate things.
Mhm.
Um, I recognized that I was feeling very burnt out, and I actually I requested to take some time off school to refocus. And they granted me some time off where I still have to study for my exams and things. So that's not going away. But um, they said they'll give me some time to just rest for a bit and focus on my mental health, get well again, because they want me to feel better in order to do well in school. So, and for me too, I started not loving medicine as much as I used to because of that feeling of burnout.
Mhm.
And I didn't like that. And like you had mentioned about loving the work rather than just
Mhm.
what you're submitting, um, I started studying in a way that was okay just for that grade or that score versus, studying to learn to be a good doctor. And that's where I was like, okay, time to step away because this is going to make me a better doctor as well. Um, and so right now I'm taking some time off. I'll be going back into school the following year, like academic year. But um, that's where I think your question about me focusing on my mental health, that was the first time I prioritized my mental health because I used to always push things down. And
Mhm.
I finally gave myself a chance to look and really dive deep into my mental health, started taking counseling, therapy, and it took a while, I think, for my parents to understand what I was really going through. And they're from a very traditional, like, they're not traditional, I would say. They're quite Americanized, but they still have that Indian culture in them. And we tend to prioritize education and things like that. So they started getting nervous when I was taking some time off. And they didn't, a lot of them haven't really seen mental health as a thing, I would say. Um, because for a while, my parents thought, oh, you can just do self-help things, to figure things out. And for me, I tried that. I tried that for a long time, and I needed actually someone to talk through my things. And that's where therapy and counseling really helped. And that's why I encourage people, don't downplay your mental health and things like that, because that will really creep up. And once you really focus on it, everything else will start falling in place. And it has for me, with school, with my career, with like my coaching now and bodybuilding. It's all starting to fall in place when I focused on my mental health.
That's awesome. I love to hear stories like that because obviously being a mental health counselor, I'm like, yeah, do it. It's awesome. It matters. But to like hear stuff like that is so great. And I mean, let's go to the fact that you're in medical school. I know you're taking a little break right now. What are you hoping to do after medical school? And like, what was your inspiration to even going?
Yeah, so I love that question. It's a question, they ask just even getting into medical school,
Yeah.
but I would say my reasons have changed actually.
Mm.
And I mean the core reason is still there, but it's slowly changed as I've been in medical school on like what I want to do. But one of the main things. So I'd always been interested in medicine. I'd been interested in science growing up as a kid. Um, and I loved biology. I thought the human body was very interesting. So I love the science aspect of things. But late into college, around like middle of my college or junior year or so, my older stepbrother, he was actually diagnosed with leukemia. And seeing him go through everything he had gone through, um, it really, like, being there in the hospital and witnessing everything and how his life had been like changed through the nurses and the doctors there. It made me want to be that, for I felt very helpless during that time because I wasn't a doctor yet. And I was happy that he had good doctors in his life. Um, he did pass in 2019, but his experience in the hospital um was really good. Like he had a great staff taking care of him. And during that whole time, I just was like, man, I wish I was a doctor already because I would have the tools to help him. And it really pushed me further to pursue medical school. And one day I hope to make him proud as a doctor. And make a difference in other people's lives since I couldn't for him. I want to do it for others. And so that was one of the main reasons to get into medical field. And since then, I really got into like not exactly sports medicine, but I got into athletics a little bit because I was a competitive dancer for my whole life. And that was one thing I did want to also work with is athletes and dancers, even before getting into bodybuilding and taking my love for athletics and medicine together. So I knew I wanted to do something that integrates them. And for a long time, I thought PMR or sports medicine. But now I'm actually, and it may change again, like closer into it.
Yeah.
I'm leaving my mind open, but I'm thinking of doing something where I could do eventually my own private practice. Because in the first couple years, I'll be serving as a doctor in the Air Force since I'm within the Air Force. But eventually, I would like to transition into getting my own private practice, opening up a clinic where I can do recovery things for athletes, include body work in there as well, but also doing like some aesthetic medicine, but also doing like offering IV drips and things that athletes can get an all-in-one basically clinic. Maybe offering blood work, and things like that. So I would love to do something like that where I can incorporate my love for medicine and working with athletes and just anyone else. Doesn't have to be athletes, even though it's like geared towards them. It's for anyone who just wants a healthy lifestyle, just being able to be that for them. And for a lot of competitors, I think um, having a doctor who understands competing and bodybuilding would makes a huge difference because a lot of doctors are not aware of like what the sport really is. And like if you get injured or something, they'll just say, take a break, or don't train as hard. But I know what it is really, what that means to the competitor, and I would do my best to um, help them without having them give up, something they love, things like that. And so I know I want to be somewhere in that realm. Eventually open a private practice of myself and offer aesthetic medicine, sports medicine, things like that. Um, so yeah.
That's awesome. So you're going to school right now with those visions in mind. We know that that could potentially change. You're doing this while in the Air Force, right? So what do you do as a second lieutenant, correct?
Yes. So I'm in the HPSP scholarship program. So that's a health professional scholarship program. Currently I'm not active duty, so the the only thing that I've done for the Air Force at the moment is go through officer training school. So I'd gone through that, and what they basically um want from me before I transition back to active duty, because when I do, I would be serving as a doctor for them at an Air Force base. But during this time, their main focus for me is to finish school,
Okay.
because that's what they want. They want me to be a doctor for them. So at this moment, I'm just currently not active duty till after I'm done with school, and then I'll transition into active duty, and um, once I graduate, I become a captain and a doctor for the Air Force. So,
That's awesome. What inspired you to take that route or to serve? If you're looking for competition heels, jewelry, and fun competitor extras, then visit shoefairyofficial.com and use code CELESTE for a discount at checkout.
Yeah, so I had gone back and forth on it a lot actually. Because I had first heard about this program in senior year of college, and I found it very interesting. Uh, but I never actually committed. I'd learned a little bit about it, and I wasn't sure if that's something I'd want to do. It sounded kind of intimidating. But I always had that like desire, I think, um to serve, and serve in any way I can. And for my case, it would be through medicine, because I always want to be able to use whatever tools I have to do good, for the community. And um, with the Air Force, I'd gone actually started off looking into Army, and
Mhm.
then I eventually transitioned into Air Force. But I think my main thing is like I would love to give back in any way I can. And I love the Air Force community. So my ex-fiance actually, he was in the Air Force. So I was very like integrated in that community for a bit. Um and a good friend of mine who is actually going to be getting married next month. Uh, and I'm a bridesmaid at her wedding, but she's also a lieutenant and now captain actually in the Air Force. And she really inspired me. She's like a big sister to me.
Mhm.
And she had gone through medical school. We both went to the same college, Point Loma in San Diego. And she was like a couple years older than me, so seeing her, and I really spoke with her. I had long conversations with her about like what's life like, being in this program in the Air Force. And I was really considering it. And my parents were a bit nervous because they didn't know what what that
Yeah.
would mean. And after some discussions, they were actually very excited for me. And when
Wow.
I actually learned what it was about, um, and through the Air Force, I I learned a lot just going through like the training for the Air Force. And you get so many experiences, and it's another amazing community, and I'm all about community. So that's what led me to find eventually pick the Air Force. And yeah, it's been great so far. And it's an honor to serve, and do whatever I can with the skills I have. And that's basically, I think, what's fulfilling to me, with my career is being able to give back to all the communities that I feel um, one with, the bodybuilding community, medical community, and the Air Force community. And that's why I say, like, it's so hard to mold one person in one
Yeah.
community, you know? So I want to give back in any way I can to all three. Um, yeah.
That's wonderful. Your passion and your heart is felt and appreciated. Seriously, it's amazing and admirable as well. And clearly, like you have that desire to serve, whether that is through your eventual medical education in the bodybuilding world, you're serving a lot. I mean, locally, even you work at the gym and you also do the online coaching business, but you also train in person, you host posing clinics, glute workshops, you do intro sessions on a complimentary basis, even to help people. So, how do you manage that type of a schedule? Because that's a lot going on top of
Yeah.
studying.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I sometimes wonder how I do all that, but at the same time, I think because I love everything I do, I'm
Yes.
able to balance it. A main thing, though, I would say to help with the routine is having a routine, writing things down, planning it
Mhm.
out in your day. So then I can fit time for studying and doing everything else like my training schedule. I can make my own schedule based on client preferences, and then I work around that to figure out my study schedule. Um, and it's honestly been awesome. Like I feel blessed, to be honest, to be able to do everything that I'm able to do. Um, Sometimes it can get hard, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes it feels like a lot on the plate and it gets overwhelming. Um, but for me, planning as much as I can ahead of time is how I get to be able to do everything. Even with competing, like I'll plan my competitions away from maybe when my clients are competing, things like that. Even though sometimes it overlaps, which it did this past season,
Huh.
but that's where I'm able to separate. I'm when it's show day for my clients, it's their time. And I will work around that to do my own things. And same thing with my training at Dean Caputo's gym. I honestly, I love training. I mean, I'm an athlete to begin with. Always worked out even before bodybuilding. I was always
I
active.
was
And
wondering about that
so,
because you've had a good amount of muscle.
yeah. Yeah, because for a while I was into dance, and then when I stopped dance, I went into I was actually into CrossFit for a long time.
Okay.
And I did a little bit of like normal like bodybuilding type training at the gym. So I would do a mixture because we had like a school gym with my medical school, and so in breaks I would go work out there, and then I would also do some CrossFit, and I just love training.
Yeah.
So that's why I think I love training people as well. I love pushing people. And with the training, it's actually a lot of people would ask me then, like, oh, do you compete? Because I think I trained basically like I competed, but I
Oh,
didn't know anything about the sport. But I would get that question a lot, and it was like a seed in my head, like planted. So I thought about it, but I was like, oh, I don't know, because CrossFit is a lot of it is training for, I guess, like strength, performance sort of thing, and I didn't know anything about the bodybuilding diet or anything. It's a different thing training for aesthetics versus performance. Um, so I wasn't sure if that was really for me. But I always had that in my head, like the curiosity. Um, and then a few like I guess months later it would creep up again. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try. Um and then finally I started looking at maybe some local shows. I saw the North Coast Championships, which was that popped up on my feed, and then it happened to be actually the one promoted by my gym, my
oh,
now gym. So I didn't know who to reach out to for anything, for like coaching, training, nothing. So
yeah.
I reached out straight to him because I saw his name on the flyer. It's like, I don't know where to go. And he said, come on down. And I started like my first like posing session and like training. I did with Cece, who's actually now my partner for our coaching business, which is amazing how that full circle happened again. Um,
Mhm.
but I just always love to train. So I think um bodybuilding ended up being like a sport that was like I felt meant for me because it took my love for training and also my love for performing on stage because after stopping dance, I felt like a big part of me was missing for a
Yeah.
long time because I danced ever since since I started could walk basically. And I did different types of dance, and I used to travel actually around the world to compete. In high
Wow.
school, I started doing that. Um, and now, like when I stopped that in college, because I'd gone to a new state, I left my studio and it was hard to do school and do that.
Mhm.
So, and for ballet specifically, if you have to do it every day, to stay consistent. So there was something that was like missing in my life. And then bodybuilding kind of filled that. And you get to train and you get to be an athlete, but you also get to perform on stage. So it mixed those two loves of mine, those passions of mine together. Um, and I can't imagine now not being in bodybuilding. Um, but and I'd mentioned previously, like it had saved me in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
It saved me through my hard times, just that I'd mentioned leading up to Universe, a lot of my hardships. It was my one constant. And what actually led me to eventually pursue it was another hard time I had had in my life, um, which I actually didn't share with a lot of people till recently because it was a big it left a big effect in my life. And it was, I would say, shortly before I decided bodybuilding. And what it was is like I was in this relationship with like a couple months ago, or not now, but a
Yeah.
couple months before I pursued bodybuilding. um I had uh found out that I was pregnant for
Mm.
uh yeah, and then I eventually ended up losing the kid, and it left a big effect. And I just it was such a hard time because it was something I never thought I would have to go through. And it was just so shocking. Like basically I lost something that was a part of me. And I had no control over it. And at that time, the person I was with, he was far away, in the Air Force. He was in a different country, and I was going through all that alone. Didn't tell a word to anyone. Um, it took me a while to even tell my parents and my family because I was scared of what they would have thought. And I was just so like down, and just was going through life, but like not really going through life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
And everything was just it was hard because during that time I was in school, and we were oddly going through the pregnancy aspect of medicine. So we were learning a lot about children and pregnancy, and it was just so hard sitting in the classroom and um pretending like everything was okay. Um and that's when I was like, okay, I need to do something where I feel like I have control again over my body because I felt out of control at that time. And I wanted something that I can do for myself and feel good again. And so that's when I finally pulled the trigger on saying yes to like
Wow.
trying bodybuilding, and I went all in. Um, because that's kind of what I do when I set my mind to something. It's like I go big or go home, basically. Um,
Yeah.
and everyone knows that about me. My parents know that about me. Um, so sometimes they think I'm crazy with some of my aspirations, but that's kind of how I am. So the minute I said, okay, I'm going to do bodybuilding. Right after that, I set up with a coach. I set up with that gym, doing everything I can to really like learn the sport and everything. And I fell in love with it. And um, it took me out of those dark times, I would say. Um, so it's true when I say bodybuilding saved me, it really did. it pulled me out of those dark moments.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing your experience with that. I am truly so sorry that you had to experience that loss.
Yeah, it never, I think that loss, like it never goes away. And that's where I would say, um, it's always gonna be there. But I I'm grateful of bodybuilding and everything else that has helped me go through life despite that. And at that moment I never thought I would be able
Yeah.
to get out of that. And it was a very traumatic thing, an experience, and very emotional. But now I feel like I can also empathize with people, even as a doctor. I can empathize with my patients on how they may feel um, by losing, a child. And for me, um, it'll always be there, but now I can, I have all these other things to kind of help cope through it. And I'm thankful for that.
That's a blessing that you were able to come out of that and
Mhm.
find a sense of control within your body and your mind and your life and still carry that grief, but now with a deeper empathy and compassion.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing. And that's takes so much strength because I know you had mentioned earlier, and I wanted to say that I was sorry to hear about your stepbrother as well. So enduring loss like that, I mean, it does give you a lot of empathy, but man, it's painful no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, it definitely is. And that loss of my brother, it's like you never really like think it's gonna happen till it happens to someone close to you. Um, for cancer, for example, sometimes it seems like something that's there, but you never really think about it till it happens to someone close to you. And with my brother, he was one of my biggest inspirations, and I really looked up to him. He was a man of a big faith. He was really into missions work actually, and that's where he was diagnosed. Was in at one of his mission work, and through it all, it was just amazing to me. He would check up on me in college when he's going through all this, and whenever he's really in the depths of just chemo and like going through it, and I know he's suffering and I know he's in pain. He never really once questioned like his faith. And he just was always true to himself and always had that compassion still for people. And it just amazed me, and it made me just want to be like him, just, and I that's what I hope to do now, is just make him proud of everything I do. And that loss was painful, and it never really goes away, but I'm so thankful for the memories I have of him. And um he also wrote music and sang. And
Wow.
he has an album on iTunes that's under his name, Gian Meta. But I listen to that a lot whenever I miss him, and I love it because I get to hear his voice again.
Mhm.
Um, so I feel like he's there with me and still here with me through everything. When I won that at Universe, the pro card, I felt like he was there celebrating with me. And all the small wins I have, even now. I feel his presence. So he's like my little guardian angel. Even in the accident, when things slowed down, I was explaining this to my mom. I was just saying how I was not scared during that moment. I felt like I was protected. and I felt like God had his hand on me. Gian, my brother's like his my guardian angel. That car, that was my car, was actually my brother's first car, and it was like his gift to me, and it protected me one last time. Because yes, I got injured, but it could have been a lot worse. Um, so I am just thankful for him and um, for his presence continuously.
Yeah, wow, I can relate to so much of what you have expressed regarding grief and that experience and how you don't think certain things will happen. You know they happen, but you don't think that they'll happen in your life, and then they do, and it's too close to home, and you carry that with you. And then there's also that side of it where you still have the pain and the experience of loss, but you also have a sense of comfort and peace, and you know that they're still part of your life always.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said something. You said you're a go big or go home person, and you want, you want to make your brother proud. And I noticed that after you won your pro card, you didn't just do any pro show. Nope, you
Yeah.
went to the Pittsburgh Pro and then
Yeah.
the New York Pro. And then I'm like, and then you went to India, and I'm like, okay, so first of all, those are some big shows. So, how do you think competing among the best actually benefits you as a competitor now in her improvement season?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that because during prep, my last prep, it a lot of times I'm like, why did I pick Pittsburgh for my pro debut? But honestly, it was I'm so happy I did those big shows
Yeah.
because my goal is to be in the Olympia, to be qualified one day. And you got to be compared to the best to see where you line up, and not be afraid. Um, and that's what I wanted to do. There was no pressure. It was my pro debut. Um, and that's what I had to keep in mind. Um, the expectations are not there,
Mhm.
and so I just have to go in, show my best, and see where I line up with the best. And so during that time, I remember when I was going through Pittsburgh and New York, I was just so amazed, just be share the stage with people I've always looked up to, like Ashley Kaltwasser and Amy Delgado, and so many other people that I just um, was inspired by, and I never imagined myself sharing stage with them. And it was an amazing experience. And I learned a lot with each show and got really good feedback that I now am able to take in my off season. Um, so Pittsburgh went, I would say the experience was really well. My peak got messed up. So I was doing really well into the show and then kind of got a little messed up with the peak. But then the following shows, like I had switched coaches, not exactly for that one mistake. There were a lot of things leading into it, but I last minute had a good friend of mine coach me, and we went to New York with a better package because they had told me to come in tighter. And I was holding on to some water with some of the peaking things. And so New York was awesome. They loved the conditioning and things. So I got feedback from each show, and my goal was just to improve with each show and take judges' feedback. Um, and now I have a better idea on what they want from me into an off season. And now I'm working with James, and I'm very excited. James is I always don't know how to fully pronounce his last name. It's like Ayoti or Ayot. But you
Uh-huh.
know talking about.
Yeah, I've had him on the show and now I can't remember how we pronounce his
Yeah,
name.
I always mess up his last name, but I'm very excited for um, my next season. I'm already feeling good and have a good feeling,
Yeah.
um, and hoping to prep maybe early for next year, early next year shows. But right now, just focusing on my improvements, bringing up my glutes basically, and then coming in next time with a good tight package, with fuller glutes. So I am excited for that. But backtracking to my shows, New York was amazing because it was the same venue as Universe. So it was like a
Oh, yeah.
flashback to that time. And I just loved it. It was the same exact stage and everything. And it just was such a great vibe and great feeling being up there again.
Yeah.
Um, and now I'm getting to go back on that stage as a pro. That was just such a cool feeling. And then India was what an amazing experience. So, um, I was born in India and I lived there for
Right.
10 years, and then I moved to the US, and I hadn't been back to India in 17 years. So I hadn't been back there. And something in me just felt like I really wanted to go back. And I've been following Sharu's show for a long time, and I always thought in my head I would love to compete in India, and things were falling in place where I was able to go.
Yeah.
So I made that opportunity to go, and I loved it. Like I loved going back to my home country to do what I love. That was like a dream come true to me.
Seriously.
Um, yeah, and it was an amazing show, amazing experience. Um, and then I got to see a lot of my family that I didn't get to see for so many years. I got to reconnect with my biological dad. I hadn't seen him in 17 years, and my younger half brother. So that was just an amazing experience. I didn't know what to expect, but I got to reconnect with them, and that's another thing. It's like cool that bodybuilding gives us all these opportunities to not only travel, but like it brings together people in a lot of ways. And I don't know, like it may have been that was like the catalyst for me to reunite with a lot of my family in India. And now I would love to go back. I want to go back there to compete in Shuru.
Yeah.
So I just love being on that stage and being able to represent US and India in Shuru. And it was amazing. Everything about the show was awesome. They put a great show. Um, and the things now, though, I've learned a lot about foreign, um, just doing foreign shows, in terms of like travel and then things to consider when you're um, doing a foreign show, because like the food can be very different. So we had some issues with like how the food I'm responding to certain foods there. Um, and just the weather, because like um we found out like I can hold on. I was like retaining a lot of water, and it was hard to let go of that. Um and a lot of it I think was the weather and things like that. So next time I go to Sharu, I know what to look out for, basically, or any foreign show. So it was amazing. It was an overall amazing experience, and I can't wait to do it again.
Wow. Well, that's so awesome. I was going to ask you if you represented US or if you represented India.
So I represented both, because technically I'm representing the US there, but I also told them like I would love to represent India as well. So
Mm.
I was kind of there to represent both. Um,
Awesome.
yeah.
That's so cool. And I love how you said you learned from the experience of traveling to
Mhm.
another country to compete, but also that it brought you together with your family. How long did you stay there?
So stayed there for a little over 2 weeks.
Nice.
So I was there a week before the show, and then I stayed there a week after to just celebrate with family. Um, but it was not long enough. I wish I was there for
Oh.
longer. Because there were so many people I still had to reconnect with, and it got to a point where I was running out of time to meet all
Yeah.
these people. So my mom was actually there with me. And so she was like randomly FaceTiming me, like with some of my aunts and cousins that I didn't get to meet on the way to the airport. Like we didn't get to connect with them. And so I can't wait to go back and just really um just connect with everyone. I just we have a huge family there. So
Absolutely.
um yeah, but the reason I couldn't stay longer was because I had a show like a few weeks after. So I had to come back and make sure that I'm readjusted to the time change because that's another thing about foreign travel, just the time change and then making sure like I'm peaking well for the next show. So I had to leave, unfortunately, but also was excited to compete for the following show because that ended up being the last show. And it was kind of like, you said more like it was a last minute decision to compete, but um, it was more like redemption because I feel like I didn't bring my best in India, even though it was like a wonderful show overall. But I needed redemption of I know what I could bring, you know?
Mhm.
So, with India, a lot of things had gone wrong, like small little things that we couldn't plan for, with the weather and like things like that. And also like another issue we had run into was lack of like communication between me and my coach because of the connection. So I was relying on hotspot a lot there, but the hotspot connection was very bad in the venue. So I couldn't really send my check-in pictures on a timely basis to my coach for him to evaluate. And then we were talking about it actually today. He was saying like, oh yeah, like if only we had faster communication, I could have seen that you were holding some water and we could have, you know,
Hmm.
fixed that, things like that. But so next time I go to India, I'm gonna get my own phone there. So that's another thing, like learning, So next time I'll get my own phone. So if I have to communicate with my coach, if he's not there, I have a faster way to communicate. And so yeah, but the last show for it was a few weeks after. I just wanted to make sure I'd come in tighter, lose that water, which took a bit of time. After my travel from India, I was a little bit bloated. It may have been some of my post-show food from there. I wasn't used to some of the food. We had gone out to eat for a bit, and just the type of food too, just even the food I would cook there, the meats are a little different, things like that. So came back to kind of readjust, kind of re I guess, cleanse my gut a bit because I was experiencing that bloating and things, and then finally came in well for Indie, um, which is the Indie Super Show. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's
Yep.
the Ignore Girl show, I think was this year. It was amazing. Jamie, she's a promoter. She's
She's
awesome.
awesome. I met her at the
Oh,
women's
yeah.
workshop, spent some time with her. And so when you said that and I saw you compete there, I was like, yeah, she's amazing. She's a great
She
person.
is. She really is. Wow, she made us feel so loved and so welcome there. And I would love to go back to her show. It was an amazing experience. And I got to speak with her. We spoke for so long backstage, just talking about life and things. And um, she's just such, yeah, like you said, she's a wonderful person. And um, yeah, so it was an amazing experience. So, and it was a cool way to end my last show of the season. And got some feedback there too, so I'd come in a little bit softer for
Yeah.
indie on purpose. Um, and actually, it was probably my favorite look for that season.
Hmm.
Because it gave me more shape, I would say, because
Yeah.
I'm a very like petite, a more petite person. So coming in a little softer gives me a little bit more shape. And we got a lot of good feedback from Becky from that. Um, so she had said like wonderful shape and but she wants me to come in tighter. And um interestingly, not much mention on glute size. So I think coming in softer, I've noticed too, makes my glutes look fuller,
Yeah.
like most other people. So we're playing like that balance game,
Totally.
So the goal for this next season is to really focus on growing the glutes, like more so glute depth and roundness overall.
Mhm.
So that's why I know it's like needed to take this off season and um and just really I've been in prep since January for a long time up until the end of June.
Mhm.
So it was time for I think my body was fighting me a little bit. My mind was saying like, oh, I would love to continue, but my body was saying something else. So I know it
Right.
was time to listen to my body, time to recover, time to, gain some healthy weight and be able to just train heavy again and really grow. And take some, time. This is also the time to just spend time with friends, with family, enjoy food. I'm like a huge foodie, so all those things, that you don't exactly get to do in prep. And then come back with a better package next time. So that's the goal, just grow the glutes and it seems like the judges like me tighter. They want me to come in tighter and more conditioned. So I would like to grow the glutes where I can come in looking tighter and still have that roundness, So
Yes.
yeah.
That's awesome. And I appreciate you breaking down your season, your feedback, how you're feeling, and what you're focused on now. So I know we've talked about so many different things, but I always like to end by getting your best advice. So, what would you say is your best advice for somebody who has never competed before but would like to? And then your best piece of advice for someone on their road to pro?
So for someone who has never competed, I would say you're going to learn a lot about yourself during this time and just take it day by day, and be consistent. Um, and you are gonna be surprised and so proud of yourself. And that's the thing. Just go each day reminding yourself to never leave a stone unturned, because that's what you want to keep in mind on stage is you left nothing behind. So
This
continue, yeah, so like continue being consistent and show up for yourself every day and enjoy the journey, love the journey, and really immerse yourself in the community because this is an amazing community. So, I think that's huge and that's going to help you get through. So, just take it day by day, show up for yourself, and be with the community. And then for someone who's on the road to pro, um, I would say just continue to be resilient and really bring your all every single day. Um, this sport is a 24/7 commitment, and if the goal is pro, remind yourself of what it takes, to be there and show up again, like same as the person who's just competing, show up for yourself every day, be consistent, and remember the small wins as well, because this is a long journey and don't compare yourself to someone else's journey. each person's journey is different. And some people, it may take, you know, one shot. Some people it'll take a few years. And what you want to focus on is your own self-improvement. And it's a you versus you. And we've heard that a lot, but it's true. It is you versus you. So you're your only competition. So keep showing up for yourself and stay consistent, and you will get there, you know. I believe anything can be achieved through hard work, and whether that means getting the pro win or just being your best self as a athlete and as a bodybuilder, and um, just continue at it.
That's so good. I mean, as someone on their road to pro, I appreciate that insight a lot. And I think that it's so good, and it's really a great summary of everything we talked about as well, and what we find our worth in, and how we enjoy the process and overcoming all these challenges and proving to ourselves what we're capable of. And I'm so grateful for how vulnerable and how real you were today, and I'm just blown away, honestly, by your depth and everything you were willing to share. So I'm sure other people listening are going to want to not just tag you and say thanks for coming on, but also probably reach out, because you shared a lot of relatable topics that not a lot of people have someone to talk to about. So how can people connect with you, and maybe how can they work with you as well?
Yeah, so definitely I'm on Instagram, and you can reach out to me with any questions about life or prep coaching, whatever. So my Instagram is Verushqa, VERUSHQA underscore IFBB Pro. And also you can reach out to me through my coaching Instagram, which is Jadoo Coaching. Jadoo means magic in Hindi, by the way. So it's JADOO
Hmm.
coaching. Um, yeah, and then if you ever want to train with me and you're in the local Ohio area, I personal train at Dean Caputo's Powerhouse Gym, and you can get a free session with me, and I would love to work with you.
That's awesome. And we'll make sure all of that's in the show notes page. So you guys, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. Of course, if you're listening right away, it'll be at the top of the page. If you're listening in the future, scroll down to the category section, which is alphabetized. Not only will you find all the links to connect, but also you'll see a full breakdown of the episode in summary format, as well as a bulleted list of topics we covered and episode timestamps, so you can go back and listen to your favorite parts or share it with your teammates, your friends, your family. Let them know what resonated with you. And of course, tag us, let us know what you thought. It goes such a long way for the podcast, of course, but even further for the athletes who come on and courageously share so openly about their journey. It means a lot to us. So, VERUSHQA, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was truly my pleasure. It was. And to everybody listening, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.